Should you even buy these? Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. So we're going to learn something today. Back in the 70s and 80s, Gibson had factory seconds. And I get questions all the time about, does this affect the value? What does a second mean? What does a bargain mean? What does a two mean? This is the perfect guitar to discuss this topic. So how do you know you have a factory second guitar from this particular era? You want to look on the backside of the headstock. You're going to see a mark like this, BGN. However, you can also see a stamped 2. Another variation you'll find in the later 70s, it's actually spelled out, second. Now usually you're going to have one or the other, not double like this one. And that's why I decided this was the perfect one to talk about this on. So what does a second mean? Does it mean it's a messed up guitar, you shouldn't buy it? Is it trash? Not usually. Typically, a second just meant it was some sort of a cosmetic blemish. For example, maybe it left the factory with this ding, so they marked it a second so they could sell it at a discount. It's very similar to the Gibson demo shop of how they stamp them today as demos. Something else you might see in the 90s is promotional, not for resale. For example, they give it to an artist like Slash, he can go and play it. Or maybe it was given away as a contest prize, because in 1986, when Henry J and his investors take over the Gibson company, they discontinue the factory seconds program. Now, just because it says not for resale, that doesn't mean you can't sell it. It just means you don't have any implied warranty, and you can't take it back to the store to exchange it for a different one. You primarily only find that in the early 90s. BGN guitars are a step below a second, because BGN stands for bargain. Typically, you'll find a more extreme cosmetic blemish on this one. Like, for example, what do I think this one got marked a second/BGN for? Look right here, the binding's all janky. It doesn't line up, there's an obvious cut. We're actually lucky, because many times you can't actually see what is wrong with the guitar because years and years of wear and tear and natural aging have occurred. You have to have a really keen eye to spot it. For example, if you look at the first fret inlay really closely, you can tell it's cracked. So that's likely another reason why this one got marked. So today, what is the worst thing about a factory second? It's the stamp itself. But does it affect value? The answer is no, but yes. So think about it. If there are two identical guitars on the market and the price is the exact same, which one are you going to choose? The factory second, or are you going to get the first? You're going to go for the first if everything else is the same. However, if there is no competition on the market, it really depends on how rare the model is and what kind of condition that the rest of the instrument is in, whether it affects value or not. However, there are some serious collectors out there that would never consider a factory second in their collection. So it definitely changes the buyer pool of how many people are willing to buy that. So that's why I tend to tell people, no, it doesn't affect value, but yes. Usually have to price it a little bit cheaper than other examples. But it all comes down to the demand of the market, how rare the guitar is. And there's even weird cases where some guys like factory second Marauders better than a regular Marauder because that's the one that Kiss was known for smashing, the seconds. So whatever you're thinking or reasoning here, hopefully this helps you make an informed decision. But players, they don't care. As long as the rest of the guitar is perfectly functioning, you're good to go. However, there's one more story here. In every single listing, you're going to see the story, factory second for minor blemish, or it was a factory employee's guitar. There is some truth to that. Factory employees would mark the guitars that they wanted as a second, or I'm sure the employees got first dibs on whatever second they wanted, so they could get it at a discount. And I bought this guitar from the original family, and they said that is the exact tale of this one and how it got stamped twice. Now, stories are cheap. There's no way to 100% verify it. So if that makes you like a factory second maybe a little bit more because you think, oh, this guy stashed some really good wood. Like, for example, this guitar is surprisingly light for a circa 1974 Les Paul Custom. And so far, the only other anomaly I've seen on this one that I cannot explain is the neck binding is much more ambered over than the body's binding. So all in all, do you need to fear bargain or factory second guitars? Not usually. But to learn more about this mid-70s Les Paul Custom, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. This one cleaned up beautifully. So the story behind this is I actually had a friend of the original family drive these out to me. So I bought this one and a cool 1959 Gibson that we'll document sometime in the future. So this is a mid-70s Les Paul. They come with T-top pickups. It's still the patent water slide decal versions. But around 1975, they switch into the base plate where it says patent number, and then they stay that way until the early 90s, with some variations along the way as far as Tim Shaw's, T-tops, all that. But Gibson Nashville opens in 1975, and there's so much transitional stuff like this. What kind of neck tenon is that? It looks like it's routed for a long neck one, but there's no tenon actually extending into there. This is what is known as a transitional neck tenon. It's just a little bit longer than a short neck, but usually still routed for the full neck. But pancake bodies and volutes get introduced in '69, so this one does have a pancake layer right here, and there is one along the edge if you get it in the light just right. Here's what our bridge pickup cavity looks like. Everything's looking fine here. And our readings are looking pretty good. 3.81 in the middle position, 7.5 in the bridge, and the neck 7.75. But to continue on our body talk, it still has a 3-piece maple top. This is another reason why this one might have been a factory second. They're very visible. That will happen with age. However, that doesn't mean that the lacquer sink didn't happen too early, and maybe that's why it was marked. I don't know for sure. But depending on your lighting, you can definitely see the line. You don't need to worry unless you can fit your nail in there. It's very rare for a 3-piece top to actually separate without like water damage or something. But sometimes they do become visible. So it's a 3-piece maple top, then they put a slice of maple, then they have a chunk of mahogany, another slice of maple, and then a chunk of mahogany on the back of that. But now as far as the bridge and tailpiece setup, we still have authentic ABR1 bridges. We were just talking about Nashville opening in 1975. That's when the Nashville bridge gets introduced. However, it takes a little bit of time for Gibson Kalamazoo to adopt it. But these are just a post directly in the body. There's no bushings needed. We also still have the lightweight aluminum tailpieces. This one has a little bit of wear to it. But now our knobs. These are known as witch hats. They have such a cool look to them. But they start to transition away in 75-ish. You get reflectors for a couple of years before speed knobs become the norm. But you've got thumb bleeders on them that tell you what number you're at. For fun, here's the pick guard. It's got some scratches, but in pretty good shape. As far as the condition of the top, this one is surprisingly clean. Like, you've got a few light impressions down here, like right there. A couple of scratches in that area. A little something there. But overall, not too bad. Now let's talk about the neck. So in this era, it's a 3-piece mahogany neck, and then an ebony fretboard. But you're going to notice something about the frets. But they are rather low, but not quite as wide as the later 70s ones. It's very, very common for early 70s to get refretted. But we've got cool mother of pearl inlays, and you can tell this was a cowboy chord player. You've got a little bit of wear, mainly on that second fret, not too much in other places. This one has a 1.7-inch nut width that increases to 2.06 with a 0.78 first fret neck depth and 0.98 by the 12th. That makes it sound quite large, and yeah, sure, it chunks up a bit, but not too much. Here's that neck at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. It's just a rounded C shape. They do feel quite small though. But this is one of my favorite things about this particular one. The clear coat has not aged very much. It's still very clean looking. Like, yeah, it's a little bit yellowed, but not too crazily. But that truss rod's in perfect shape, turns both ways flawlessly. And check out the styling of the Les Paul Custom truss rod cover. It's way different from the later ones. Once Nashville opens. Doesn't have as much of an edge to it as far as coloring. Now we can move on to the back. So it looks really clean, but if you get it in the light, you can see quite a few impressions. Looks like some light worming marks here, and then some other impressions along this edge, as well as some dings down here. That's why after 30 plus years, it's hard to say, you know, what was the thing that caused it to be a factory second. Because here's the thing about the binding. Had the guy that brought it to me not pointed it out, I'm not sure I would have saw it. Because it's just one of those things that until you see it, you don't see it. And then you never not see it. But we do have the thin binding in the cutaway in this here. You can see there's a ding on this side. And some more impressions over here. But usually the pancake body gets like a finish checking layer around it. So this one's actually pretty clean in that aspect. You can see some lines where the binding truly ends and the body begins. That's pretty common. Just some light wear. But again, I cannot explain why the neck binding is more yellow than that. Is it possible it had a touch-up early on in its life and they used a different color lacquer? Maybe, but we'll see that under the blacklight here shortly. But here's a look at our toggle switch cavity. Everything's good in there. And now our control cavity. All the solder work looks good to me, but I don't think I've seen these capacitors before. But there were a lot of small variants in this era. But we do have one readable pot code dating it to 1973, the 44th week of the year. So most likely this was completed early 74-ish. But 1974, there's actually a 20th anniversary inlay, but this one does not have it. So in many ways, it's very similar to Randy Rhoads' custom, except for it's the Black Beauty version. But the neck on this one is clean, and if you get it in the light just right, you can see the seam lines of our three-piece neck. But outside of some light surface marks, it actually looks good. Now here's the thing about waffle back tuners. They look so cool, but they just do not stand the test of time. This set, it's about as good as you can hope for. They're not the best, they're a bit stiff. They do function. If you're buying this era of Les Paul Custom, I highly suggest just swapping them out for newer waffle backs because they work way better and look just about as good. But our serial number on this one is 175298, made in USA, and then BGN and 2. It's funny, depending on the angle you look at it, depends which one is more prominent. So this one, you just see the 2. But from here, you just see the BGN more. I've never seen it double stamped like that. That's why I'm tempted to keep this one. I'm going to post it at a price that I'm okay to let go of it for. But it is kind of a good little history piece in the collection. But at the end of the day, at least this video exists. But this is what a volute is, in case you're curious. It's that little bump on the back of the neck. It was introduced within Gibson solid bodies in 1969 and lasted until 1982-ish as standard production. But speaking of the blacklight test, here it is. Everything's looking good on the top. This is a good way to check to see, is it just a seam line showing or is the finish actually cracking? Because rather than a green line showing, you'll see a black line, or if somebody's like tried to touch it up, it'll become obvious. But everything's good there. And then if you look on your headstock, everything's fine. As far as the blacklight of the edges, there you go. It's very even. So if it was touched up, it was a long time ago. Because there are such thing as repairs that are blacklight test proof. And here's a look at the other side just for fun. If you're curious what that crack is down here, or what looks like a crack, that's the pancake body seam line showing. All is good here. But wait until you see the weight on this one. 9 pounds, 6 ounces. I mean, that's not like super lightweight by today's standards, but for one of these, 10 to 11 pounds is about the average. So getting a little under 9.5, not too shabby. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. I did find one small playability issue with this one. When I straightened the neck out and adjusted the action, there is one fret that's a little bit buzzy. It's the 8th fret on the B string. You hear how it's a little bit choked as compared to these other ones? But if you just throw a little bit more relief in the neck, that doesn't really matter. And you can still play it as is. So there we go. Now you know all about factory seconds and bargain guitars. Should you fear them? Not necessarily, but definitely approach them like any other used vintage guitar. Make sure everything is working. However, you shouldn't have any issues with them. The worst thing about them in today's market is typically the stamp itself. This particular one I thought it played pretty good. It's a nice little Black Beauty custom that cleaned up awesomely. I thought it might. So if you're interested in being the next owner of this one, you can find it for sale on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. Otherwise, we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. If you like mid-70s customs, you're gonna love this Brazilian rosewood top version. I call it the Yeti.